Afternoon. How are you today? Well, the weather is unbelievable. It's about 71 degrees, so I'm wearing a shirt. And I took off my tie. That was how I'm relaxing because it's getting later in the day, so it's time to relax a little bit. In the Thomas Jefferson part of this, I guess you would characterize the weather, there's no breeze, 72 degrees, as a high pressure. High pressure results in clear skies and sunlight. And when we talk about barometric pressure, we're talking about layers of air. And if the air is warm, it's lighter. If it's colder, it's heavier. And we had high pressure yesterday. And when you have high pressure, you have rain and mist. And the mist was really difficult last night when I was coming back from the doing the show for Ari, or with Ari. So, what's going on today? There are several things that are interesting. A judge appointed by Ronald Reagan had a sentencing yesterday, I believe, and he wrote 6 pages explaining his thinking about the sentencing, asking what kind of a public, referring to politicians, can refer to those convicted who've either pleaded guilty or been found guilty by a jury and sentenced, who can call them hostages? And he said there's something really wrong when that's going on in America. What could be more succinctly stated? And I am hopeful that the judges over time come to the point where they are the guardians of what is right and apt as a result of our Constitution and laws and rules and regulations and what is considered normal decorum. And I think this judge standing up as he did, saying what comes easily to him because this is a lifelong thing. And he's been on the bench, appointed by Reagan, I think it's 37 years. I'm not sure exactly the dates, but he's long been involved in slicing and dicing some very difficult cases. So I'm very encouraged when we have people talking this way. Now, we had Sotomayor talking against those who would allow a man to be executed. And she shared this position with 2 other members of the Supreme Court only days ago, and outvoted by the heartless members of the court who really have no business being there and who can hardly be surprised when America distrusts them as being honest brokers. So the man has now been executed, and they tortured him with an earlier attempt to execute him, and so they came back with a nitrogen-based method. And as you and I are breathing normally, 74% of what is going through us, the mix, is nitrogen. But what the method of killing, executing this man in Alabama, was a substance that fills the lungs with nitrogen and without oxygen, and so you suffocate. You die that way because of that. That's astonishing, isn't it? How could you possibly consider yourself humane or civilized and do that and watch them? Now, in the past, there's been another kind of deathly brew that those who execute embraced. And it went something like this. You give someone a medication in which they're basically paralyzed, so they can't show what they're feeling, but they are awake and alert. And then you give them at least one medicine that is hell for the last few moments of their life. And so it's not apparent to anyone else how this person is suffering when you execute them. The Code of Hammurabi was an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And once I was being interviewed at a New York radio station in Midtown Manhattan after I had clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals. And it may have been after I was a prosecutor too, I'm not sure. But it was reported back to me that a judge heard me giving this interview saying that the death penalty was wrong on several levels. First of all, for all those folk Christians, you're supposed to be peaceful. You're not supposed to hurt or harm. You're supposed to turn the other cheek. And that's not what we do. But for those of us who are also practical, I think we can start with the position that no person should be punished or executed who is innocent. And we do punish and we do execute the innocent. So under what laboratory condition can we be assured that what we're doing is actually, assuming the punishment is right, that we're actually punishing the guilty person? Now, from case to case, there are things that make it seem so obvious there could be no other explanation. But life teaches you that when there is no other explanation you can think of, sometimes there is an explanation. Sometimes there's a deception. And DNA and Barry Scheck's Innocence Project is one of those examples of pushing back against junk science with something that is reliable, that tells us that someone can be excluded from consideration for a crime. And we have had lots of people who came close to being executed, and the Innocence Project saved them. So we can presume, since we're not catching them all, that we are executing innocent people, and we are imprisoning innocent people. And how does a civilization embrace that kind of misconduct? And the answer is, it can't, it shouldn't, but we do. Judge Sotomayor said in her dissent to those judges that let this execution go forward, she said she was sad. And I think it shouldn't surprise us that she feels with empathy the human condition in its best and its worst. That's why she's such a good appointment to the Supreme Court. And we have others. And the other night I talked about Judge Breyer, or Justice Breyer, who's no longer on the court, who understood that our law is only as good as the trust we have that what's being done is fair and proportional and open to fair argument and demonstrations that approximate as close to perfect as we can what is right in the circumstances. But we're far, far away from that now. And it takes extra work to get it right. So, and there are portions of America, Alabama, that leaps to mind, where our leaders don't get it. They're not up to the mark. It's just a game to them. Yeah, we executed somebody who killed somebody else, and we know that this one did it. Well, did you really? And I think the family should be suing them, because the punishment that this man suffered, he apparently went on for a half hour or more, choking himself to death. May have, well, this is not what we want to send around the world, and it's not what we want to suffer here at home. Now, I guess we should get to public enemy number one. We have Trump in court today, in which the jury got the Carroll case And while the summations were going on, Trump got up and walked out of the courtroom. Now, I think, like a child, he's so used to having people around him who care about his every whim. He thinks, I guess the jury will say something like, oh, we got to do something for the man. Look at how he's suffering. But even in this case, which is only about what would be a fair amount of funds to restore the reputation of Miss Carroll, when Trump had a megaphone so large that few on planet Earth have the reach that he had and has now as a candidate. So we have to consider how that's going to happen. Now, they had an expert testify about the subjective and objective indications of how she suffered, that is, how Carroll has suffered. She had a following for her writings that diminished. She had a good feeling among people, but she was beaten by Trump. And even after Trump lost the first trial, winning her $5 million before this trial was going on, Trump, was trashing her in every way possible. And even with the same negative statements that got him the adverse decision in the first case. So what kind of an evil monster is Trump? How does anybody sit with him and talk to him about anything? How could you not sit there and say, this is embarrassing to be with this guy. I shouldn't be here. I have to get up and leave the table. I cannot be with this man and be associated with him for who he is. Some people may think I am, and that's not who I want to be. My dad said to me in a note he sent once, probably a birthday, I don't remember for sure, but the sentiment was that he didn't have much, that he can only give me his name, and he asked me to protect it. And so I don't know that I've done that, but I'm well aware of the responsibility, particularly of my father's generation, in which you wanted your children to do better than they did. And my dad told me that, and he did that. And I had the sense sometime when I was young, when he was holding my hand and we were walking down the street, that he couldn't help me figure out how to get out of the Bronx. Now, it turned out that wasn't exactly true, because he saw that I did well at math and that I wrote and I spoke in such a way that gave me access to educational opportunities at first that enabled me to have other opportunities that I could share with the family as I got older. So I still, because that's the path I follow, believe that's the path we should follow for everybody. And that's why when I see increasing costs of education, I think that that's terrible. And what does education have to do with our present situation? Well, what it has to do is if we don't think straight, we don't act straight, we compromise ourselves and everybody else around us. And to go back to the Reagan judge, that's about what he said, that we have compromised America in these views. And it's just got to stop. So I'm enjoying the warmth today. I don't know how long I'm going to get this, but today's good enough. And so I say to you from my cathedral of trees, hope you're out and it's warm where you are, and it will be soon. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.